Yo, we did it. We're live.
What's up?
Today I am joined by my friend, and this is very embarrassing, and I just admitted it to you beforehand, even though we've known each other for nigh on a year at this point, and I don't know how to pronounce your last name. It's not your fault. I'm stupid. Sghiouar.
That's very close.
It's close enough for horseshoes.
Close enough.
Okay, I am so sorry.
It's okay.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you for making the effort.
I'm just not so smart. Anyway, Abdel Sghiouar, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. Please introduce yourself. Otherwise, I'll do a bad job.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Abdel. I'm a cloud developer advocate at Google. I've been at the company for almost 11 years. So I do what Josh does, basically, well, less awesome than him, but
No.
try to emulate at least. I work mostly on Kubernetes and containers and service mesh and software security and AI, because that's what everybody cares about these days. And and we are here hanging out in lovely Barcelona.
Barcelona.
I love this place.
Yeah. And for people who don't know, we're recording this from a padded white room
Yes.
with no windows.
This room does not look like Barcelona.
No.
This does not represent the city.
Yeah, just trust us. It's gorgeous out there. Imagine like happy people drinking sangria while riding bicycles. And
it's sunny.
it's sunny, and
And
there's
we look like we're sitting in a hospital.
yeah, exactly. It's the worst. We could white. There's no such thing as white screen, but if we had a green screen, we could put ourselves in front of the
Sagrada de
La
Familia,
Sagrada
maybe?
Familia, exactly. Like
Or
that'd
the
be-
beach.
Oh my gosh, the beach here, man, amazing. So yeah, we're in Barcelona. It's a tough job, but somebody
It
has
is.
to do it.
Yes.
Somebody has to do it. Where-
Unfortunately.
I know you actually. So you used to live in Morocco,
Then moved to Belgium.
right?
And then now I live in Sweden.
All great places, but I met you, I think, in
I think we
Devox,
met in Morocco. Yes.
Jay McGrib, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
No, I think we met in 2018. You were there with Raidsank.
Oh, okay. Was that the first time?
That was the only time. That was the only time Devox Morocco was organized in Marrakesh. So I met you at the lobby of the hotel
okay.
with Raidsank, where he was still at Google.
Right.
And then you didn't came back, I think, since then to Devox Morocco.
Well, I mean, to be fair, there was a pandemic in the middle, but yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
sure. So actually, we're going back to the same hotel, by the way. So this year it's going back to Marrakesh because it was in
Ah.
Agadir for a few years, but
Yes.
we're bringing it back to Marrakesh, same hotel.
Marrakesh, because Agadir was beautiful, but it was so painful to get to. It's just a little out of the way.
You
know?
mean Agadir, the other
Yeah,
one?
yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Marrakesh is much easier.
Marrakesh is much easier. It's the second biggest airport in the country, and
Yeah.
there is a lot of direct flights from all over. Well, Europe.
Yeah.
I think for you, for the US, you will have to fly to somewhere in Europe, but it's much easier than
Yeah,
Agadir.
no problem. I can do. I'm used to 2 hops, but Agadir was like 2
Yeah,
hops with long layovers, and I'm like,
2 hops and a 1 hour 45 minutes drive to
Right,
get to the
yeah.
venue. it was.
and it was worth doing. I didn't have time, and I had other things that were making the journey problematic. But anyway, I've been going to that conference. I love that conference. Are you in? So like,
I am in the program committee,
Right.
and the organizers are a friend of mine.
Yeah.
So if
Other-
you are listening to us, the CFP is still open. It will close on the 7th of July.
right?
CFP.devox with 2 x's.ma,
Mhm.
and the website is devox.ma. So devoxx.ma.
Yeah, it's you mentioned this, but it's impossible in my mind that somebody doesn't know what DevOps is. But you're right; it's possible. Maybe I guess now that you say it, maybe somebody doesn't know. But if you don't know, you should know.
Yes.
And actually, so the conference is DevOps Morocco, but it was started by Badr. Badr is my friend as well.
Badr Houari and
Yeah.
Faisal.
Yeah, and
So they started it together.
as
and
Jay McGrib.
Yeah, as it started at Jay McGrib.
Right, and
I was in the first editions.
Me too.
Before leaving Morocco.
I was in Jay McGrib.
Yeah.
And then I was in there for a few of those.
Yeah.
And then he turned it into a DevOps.
Yes.
And even that has been now what, 8 years?
I think
5 years?
2015 when he turned it into
2015?
DevOps. So 2015 to now minus 2 years of COVID. So
Yeah, but I mean, still almost a decade of DevOps Morocco.
yes.
Which is super fast. You know?
And actually, you know what's funny
Yeah.
is up to last year, DevOps Morocco was the only DevOps that had a new venue and a new city every year, or a new venue every year.
Yeah.
Because it was a couple of years in Casablanca, it was all different places.
Right.
Then went to Marrakesh, went to Agadir,
Right.
went to this village next to Agadir. To Ghazouts. But last year it was back to the same village, so we broke the the
okay.
streak.
Yeah, I've been to a bunch of them, and I just love that show. And Badr,
Yeah, he's great.
he's great is not the right word. He's obviously great. No doubt.
He's a special character.
Just the guy has got. I could talk to him all day. You know,
Yeah.
je t'ai jamais dit comment on s'est rencontrés?
Toi et Badr?
Ouais.
Non.
Il était à Java One, ça fait une dizaine d'années, quoi, plus que ça.
Ouais.
Et on s'est croisés dans le floor.
Dans le floor, ok.
Ouais,
C'était à Vegas?
Yeah, San Francisco, je crois. Mais il était juste, Louis ou bien moi, on était perdus.
D'accord.
On a commencé à parler sans savoir, qui l'autre était.
Sans savoir qui.
Oui, exact. Incroyablement amicable. Moi, je l'adore, bien sûr. Ouais, et sa femme, gentille, Hannah et Badr, quelle équipe. Yeah, just the greatest, coolest people. And I speak French because of Morocco. So when he said he's got a conference in Morocco, I'm like, I want to go. I need to be there, please. I would love to be there. Give me a reason.
Yeah. We speak French in Morocco for the people who are listening to this. We speak French and Arabic. So
beautiful French, beautiful Arabic. I want to learn Arabic. It's on the list. I just haven't gotten there. But in the meantime, I can still connect with a lot of people with French, and it's and they speak. And by the way, Badr speaks fluent English, just like you, just like so many others, But they also speak French. Right?
Yeah, but it's cool that because it's cool that actually we speak French. That because sometimes we end up in like other countries where English people understand English, so you're able to actually say things in French, so without people around you understanding.
Right.
It's good to speak more than one language.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, absolutely. And it opens. I think okay, Badr, not a good example because he's friendly to everybody.
Yes.
Even if I was just a person who only spoke one language, or 0.75 of a language, he would be friendly. But I mean, lots of people don't warm up.
Yeah.
Unless you feel like you've met them a little bit
closer.
Yeah. Come meet me halfway, right? Yeah. Nobody wants to feel like they have to do the whole journey to friendship themselves, So yeah, anyway, so that conference, one of my favorites. No exaggeration. It's awesome. Also in, the ones in Morocco is warm and beautiful.
Yes.
And each city, like you go talk about Marrakesh, it's
it's one of those. It has a special vibe, right? It's like each city is different because the country is so long. Like cities are very far away from each other.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's all the same culture, but like I love Marrakesh.
Yeah.
I grew up going there for vacation. It's 2 hours and a half from Casablanca, the biggest city.
Right.
Casablanca
is great too.
Yeah, and it's very nice because it's very packed.
Yeah.
Like very, very practical to actually get around. It's not like very spread out like Casablanca because Casablanca is very big.
Right.
So it's a great city. Amazing. I love it.
I do too. I spent a lot of time in Casablanca. Obviously, there's that movie, Casablanca, which is famous in the West, and it's always had a romantic place in my heart.
Nice.
But then you go to Marrakesh, you go to these other cities. It's oh my god, it is such a beautiful place, and it's warm, and you can't. Devox Morocco is later in the year. It's right around
in October.
Belgium. Yeah.
So it's 1 week before. This year is 1 week before Belgium. So it's October 2nd to the 4th, and it's gonna be warm. It's gonna be almost like here. Unfortunately, there will be no beach. Fortunately, there will be a swimming pool. So
yay! But every time I go there, because all these other conferences in Europe are happening, and it's just south of Spain, right? We're actually in Spain right now. It's just an hour flight from here, basically.
Yes.
But at least Casablanca is.
Yeah.
But all these other conferences in Western Europe are happening around that time. It's cold. I have to pack a heavy jacket.
Yes.
And then it's like, okay, I'm going to Devox Morocco. Just t-shirt and shorts.
Yes.
It's the best experience. Anyway, and the conference is great because
Yes.
By the way, what is it, like 50% women, right?
Close. We don't have stats, but yeah, the diversity is quite high.
So good. So good.
I studied with a lot of women in university.
Of course.
When I came to Europe, people were talking about diversity in tech, and I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. We don't have this problem.
It's just already there. Yeah. It could be better. It could always be better.
Of course.
But it's some of the best numbers I've ever seen. Of all the conferences I've been to, and I've been to thousands of them at this point. It's truly remarkable. So anyway, great show, great community, great devs. You used to live there, and then you decided to move to the frozen north.
Yes, that's a good way of describing it.
What was it? And that's dark most of the year.
Yeah. That's actually another good way of describing it.
The dark frozen north.
So I moved to Belgium, and I lived there for 4 years, and I was living in the French-speaking parts of Belgium. And I was like when it was the opportunity to move, I decided I want to move to as far as possible in Europe, just to experience something completely different, right? Because if you stay on the kind of I mean, don't hate me on saying this, but if you're a foreigner and you're on the south side of Europe, it's kind of all kind of the same culturally speaking. I mean,
Sure.
food is different, of course, but like Germany, France, it's different languages. Like the Nordics is very different.
Yes.
Nature is different, people are different, culture is different. So I wanted to experience that.
Yeah.
And the fun story is when I was moving, because it was an internal transfer with my company, they were offering me Norway or Sweden. I was like, no, I'm just gonna go to Sweden because
Yeah.
it's less boring than Norway.
Okay.
Because it had like Sweden is the biggest, 10 million
Right.
people versus 5, right?
Right,
So yeah, I don't regret it. It's a great country. It's amazing. People are great. The food can be better. Always.
Well,
it can always be better.
It's all, I mean, this is the thing. There's my partner has lived in Southeast Asia for 20 years of her life, and but she was raised and born in the U.S. So she's experienced the whole spread of like spice profile,
Yes.
and there's nothing worse than feeling disappointed with the food you're eating,
Of course.
and you just know like, well, this is convenient, but it's not delicious.
Yes.
And but that's just because that's her thing.
Yes.
But if you're coming from America and you're used to the food that's there, then that's going to be delicious to you. And it's,
of course,
maybe you're disappointed when you go to a spicy place or whatever.
Of course. Yeah.
It's not nothing, no such thing as good or bad, just context, right?
Of course.
Okay. So now you're doing all this. You work for the Google.
Yes.
That's a good startup. That's going to be big.
It is. We are trying.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's got potential.
I
think people
Thank you.
are going to be
Thank you for
impressed.
trusting in us.
And you're out there helping people build better Kubernetes.
Yes. So I work on Google Cloud, right? So I work on Kubernetes, generally speaking. I co-host a podcast called Kubernetes Podcast by Google. So I'm one of the co-hosts on that podcast, and then we have a YouTube channel where we do content, and we also do all sorts of there is the fun story I can tell you. What about the food?
There's a comment. I don't know. Is this a like PG-13?
No. Yeah.
Okay.
It's PG-13. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I work on Kubernetes. I do the podcast. We do content. We do blogs. We do all sorts of things. And
so you advocate for developers.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And so I don't really advocate for Kubernetes itself because Kubernetes was created by Google and everybody knows what it is, right? So most of my advocacy is around the practical side of how to use Kubernetes.
And that's why you're here talking about Spring and Java at
Correct.
Spring.io.
Yes. So the talk at Spring.io was, we had a workshop and a talk. So the workshop was how to build performance Java apps on Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And the talk was on the same topic.
Nice.
I talked with Dan Dobrin. So Dan covered all the Java-specific optimizations. Basically, the TLDR of our talk is that if you have an application and you're running it on top of a platform, the performance optimization you can do is a sum of all these layers, right? You cannot just optimize the app, not optimize the infrastructure, or the other way around, and expect it to perform.
Right.
So we talked about all the optimizations you can do at multiple layers, right? Like the crack stuff, the PGS, PGO, that's more the Java side.
The app side.
But then there is also the infrastructure side,
Right.
right? Like CPU boosting, memory management, resource management, all that stuff. So
that's really. Did you see yesterday's keynote, the morning keynote?
yes.
There was an interesting bit in the keynote. I'm not sure. I don't remember the specific details, but there's some insight that I didn't really think about, which is kind of makes a lot of sense. Which is if you've got like a less. I'm not sure if they were speaking about Google's cloud or some other brand.
I don't remember which cloud.
Some other the distinguished competition, I'm sure. But if you're buying a cheap commodity node, on, let's just say the cloud. I don't know. I forget. Okay,
which
forgive
one?
me.
Whatever.
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
I mean, maybe not all cheap commodity nodes are the same, but in the one about which they're speaking, this if you bought a cheap commodity node, effectively you're going to have less concurrency, right? Because you're going to have fewer cores and all this.
Yes.
And so where virtual threads always make a difference, they make a much more pronounced difference. In that case, and that kind of struck me.
That's a very good one. Actually, so this talk that we did with Dan, there was a very interesting conversation, right, when we were preparing. And this is something like this is the kind of things that you have to really do a lot of tests to figure out.
Yeah.
So a lot of cloud providers today are offering you some form of bring your own container, right?
Yeah.
Call it functions, call it
Cloud
container as a service, Cloud Run, for example, in Google Cloud. But what they are not telling you, of course, is they are not telling you that they're not exposing the details of the underlying hardware, and that when you deploy your app, you might land on one CPU versus another, but you don't know.
But it's homogeneous, basically.
It's heterogeneous, but you don't have access to that information.
Oh,
right?
So you could land on a slow node and then a fast one in the same day?
Yes.
Ooh.
Yeah, because like no cloud provider runs a single CPU architecture across all their data centers.
Right.
They all run multiple types of CPU architectures. There's the old ones, but they already bought the hardware, so they're not just going to throw it away.
No, that would be
They're going to
terrible.
use it until at the end of its life. But there is also the new ones.
Yeah.
And they do kind of like some platform-specific implementation to try to get like consistent performance across all architectures,
Right.
but you cannot have it. It's not 100%.
Right.
So then you will notice it as a developer. You will notice your app runs and starts slower or faster depending on where it lands,
Right.
right? So that's actually, I call that the downside of abstraction, right?
Right.
You abstract away something, and then people don't know what they're running on.
Yeah, it's a leaky abstraction.
Exactly. So,
And there's no way to like pin to a particular CPU.
in Cloud Run, you cannot do that.
Okay, I mean that's reasonable.
Yeah, in GKE or Kubernetes, you can, of course, because with Kubernetes, you have the choice to choose which specific machine type.
Right.
And depending on the machine type, exactly which CPU it is, and that you get a little bit more kind of, specific performance. Yeah, exactly.
And that makes sense because you mimight have AI workloads that benefit from other kinds of CPU improvements. And all
Yes,
that stuff.
yes.
GPU.
Yes.
And also, I wouldn't. There's the same. I bet Lambda has the same problem, right?
I am quite confident it does. We haven't tested, but I'm quite confident. Lambda or Fargate, right? Because Fargate is the equivalent of Cloud Run.
But even Lambda, even more abstracted, you're just giving it a
function.
Yeah,
it's just code.
A whole Java jar with a function inside of it.
Yes.
But basically, it's going to run that. Who knows where?
Yes.
I don't think there's any way to pin it. I don't know though. I haven't tested it. Don't look at me. I don't know. But it feels like they wouldn't.
Yeah. Azure has the same with this thing called ACS, like Azure Container Services.
Okay.
I would assume that it's not this, like they cannot guarantee you that they will run on the same CPU all the time.
I wouldn't even want them to guarantee it because, like I said, what are the implications that every time there's a new generation, they have to throw away everything else?
Yes.
What a huge waste.
And that goes against the whole point of serverless, because the whole point of serverless is you don't see the server, right? so yeah, it's very interesting as an observation, specifically for like Java applications that are, or any type of applications that are either like a startup time sensitive or kind of performance sensitive, like
real time
during execution. Yeah, exactly. So
interesting. I suppose that is obvious when you think about it. I just don't really think about it a lot. That's a very good point.
Yeah, I mean, it comes with testing. You do some testing and then you figure, oh, this is okay. I take the same Spring application and I run it on, let's say, Cloud Run. I do multiple deployments and I just time the startup time, right? Like I look for the startup message, how many seconds, and then you just deploy the app multiple times, or just keep the same app but just like update it to get multiple deployments, and then you will see inconsistencies in the number. The number is not always the same. And of course, there will be inconsistencies because, the GVM is also not very consistent. And, there will be few milliseconds or seconds of difference.
Sure.
But in our testing, those were like 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, right? Like, so
the deviation can be
significant.
That could be a whole run of a function or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly,
yeah. But okay. This is why I am just very happy about whenever I can. I don't want the startup time of my process to be a deal breaker. Right.
Yes,
like,
of course.
It just shouldn't matter. I still don't, to be honest with you, no offense, I don't get the function use case. I just don't. Just start one JVM and let it run the whole month.
So
and it's trivially cheap to do it. So, and then it's all primed and loaded. It's actually more energy efficient to keep one thing running than to have to start up a new process and tear it down and let the JIT happen each time, right?
Yes. So that's a very good point. I think that for me, functions serve one very specific niche use case, which is acting as glue between different services.
Sure.
Like you have a queue, messages come in, you want to trigger on processing those messages only when there are messages coming in the queue.
Right.
When there are no messages, you don't want to do anything, right? So kind of like cloud providers usually provide you with services that are extremely disconnected from each other. Like there is like little to no integration.
Right.
So you end up just writing functions to integrate them together, right? And that's how most people use functions.
Yeah.
You're not gonna host your website as a function because that would be stupid, right?
Yeah. But even there, I gotta tell you, I've used all the cloud vendors, and okay. So I think you don't have to say a thing. In fact, we can just blur your face or something. But okay. Have you ever used Alibaba's cloud?
No.
Aliyun?
No.
So Amazon has every knob and whistle.
Yeah.
Right. They have every checkbox.
Yes.
And I can't imagine. In fact, I know these things aren't all going to play well with each other. They just can't. They're moving too quick.
Yes.
Azure is, I guess, I would say it's second in terms of like really well sort of thought out, put together but also minimal. Like there's not duplicative products. Really in Google Cloud. I think it's really well done. It's and if you want to show your boss, hey, every single freaking use case that could ever happen to us, it's supported there. Maybe you couldn't make that case as easily for Google Cloud, but I think you could say 99% of the use cases that we can ever have are on Google Cloud. And the things that I've seen, and again, not all of it, because even there, it's still a lot. It's just too much for me, one person. But even there, it just feels so well integrated. These things are like obviously meant to play well together, and so that part I like. Like the GKE plus the load balancer plus these. I mean, these little. You're not just using Kubernetes. You're using Kubernetes plus all this other stuff that isn't there when you deploy stock standard.
Yeah, because no application lives in vacuum, right?
No, but I mean, but if you listen to, it's easy to think, I just deploy Kubernetes and now I've got myself a cloud. No, you need a load balancer, you need ingress, you need security, SSL, you need all this stuff.
You need
Who's gonna spin that up for you? Who's gonna provide that and do the routing and the networking and all that? That's Google, not just Kubernetes.
Yes, I mean, if you only write in hello world applications, then maybe Kubernetes is enough. But the reality is, no one is doing just that, right?
And even on Kubernetes, right? You've heard, anybody who's listened to me before has heard, I make no bones about it. Kubernetes is not the layer I would start my journey.
No,
Knative feels better to me.
Yes.
Obviously, there's Istio and these other things as well. There's and even there you've got.
Even Istio is quite complex, right?
Oh,
it's quite complex, right?
But I mean, you need it. Like you need mutual TLS. You need all this other stuff, right? Or you need something like that, right? You can do it with Spring Cloud Gateway, for example. Ting. Lots of things. But my point is, it's just Kubernetes isn't the story. It's the beginning of the story. It's a Lego.
It's a platform. It's a Lego. It's one brick in.
It's a big one.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I like that well integrated experience. And maybe I'm biased. I was very impressed with Microsoft Office when they decided to make it so I could copy text from Microsoft Word and paste it into Excel back 25, 30 years ago.
Okay.
Like that was a big deal,
Yeah, of course.
People don't remember. Those things used to be separate. And then Microsoft's like, what if they weren't? Wait, what? It blows my mind.
Like a little Bob.
A little Bob, like exactly. Clippy. I mean, it all seems like the wheel seems so obvious now. But somebody had to have like a
20 years ago.
30 years. Yeah, exactly.
It's actually this is an interesting observation. Like I think that people in tech have a very, very short selective memory.
Yeah.
We tend to forget how privilege is the wrong word. How
hard
hard this is to be.
Yeah.
And people feel kind of overly privilege is not the right word. They feel like they deserve the things that is provided for them today, right?
Right. And they get annoyed when it doesn't work perfectly.
Yes.
And I'm like,
I'll give you a good example.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm curious about your opinion. You are an open source project, right? You provide open source, so you provide the code.
Yeah.
Do you have to provide the builds? Do you have to actually build the project? Like, do you have to provide the artifact? Is the artifact a mandatory thing from the maintainers, or is it a nice to have? Right?
Yeah.
And what happens when you stop providing them? Like what Linkerd did recently. Linkerd is an open source service mesh. Yeah, they basically said, we're not going to provide the builds for free. We're going to provide the code, you build the containers yourself. And everybody was pissed at them. But then if you look at it from their perspective, it's like, okay, that's a few $100,000 saved on compute for building the artifacts, right?
Yeah.
And then people are like, no, but you're open source. We're like, yeah, open sourse means we provide code.
Yeah, it means that we're doing it for free. And unless we find some other way to get around that, this is going to cost money.
Yeah. So I'll give you a mind-blowing number. Kubernetes, the open source project, they spend $6 million per year on the infrastructure needed to build, test, and release Kubernetes. They get cloud credits from Google and AWS, and I think that this year they're also getting them from Azure. So last year they got $3 million, and they were burning through it. And by the middle of the year, or early in the year, they realized they're not going to make it until the end of the year. So they went and got more credits from AWS, and they had to do some changes because they were burning it in egress cost. Because each time you download the image, they pay for it, right?
Wow. it's somebody's got to pay.
Yes,
it's not free.
That money is coming from somewhere, right?
Whoa.
Yeah, it's $6 million that they spent on the project in 2023, and I think another 6 this year between AWS and Google.
And that's not for and by the way, that's not for, there's a much higher cost because a lot of these contributors worked for example, VMware or Broadcom.
Well,
they worked for Microsoft. They worked for, are there any Amazon ones?
Yes.
Yeah, they're Amazon.
Google, Red Hat.
Red Hat. I mean, these people are employed thankfully. They're not just, I mean, a lot of people contribute just patches by themselves, but in terms of having really smart people focusing on this full time, you got to pay these people.
Yes,
and you got to pay them
very well
competitive salaries for Kubernetes platform engineers, So that's $6 million, but that's a drop in the bucket.
Yes, that's nothing compared
to the total cost.
Yeah.
And then people are like, well, I want you to build the artifact for me too. I'm like, well, you don't know how much you're getting for free,
I think it was Dims. I forgot his real name. His nickname is Dims. He's a very popular. He's one of the SIG leads for Kubernetes. A very popular figure. He tweeted recently a tweet which was something like, so they were doing some code cleanup, and Kubernetes had its biggest code removal ever, which was one.
I saw that. Yeah. All the cloud providers.
Yes, all the cloud provider code was out of Kubernetes, and he did an estimation in which he calculated that if that was paid, like the amount of money that was paid to get to that stage was something around $9 million in like salaries, in like people.
Yeah, over half a decade or more.
Yes.
This process. So basically, Kubernetes has for the longest time had these like vSphere, Google Cloud, Azure.
You can call it you can think about it as integration code towards specific providers.
Yeah, right? Specifically. But it means
it was in Kubernetes code, right?
And it means you're linking to libraries from these providers.
Correct.
And those things change. So somebody's got to maintain them.
Yes.
And it's just very much against the grain. It's just easier if they maintain it themselves.
Yeah.
And that meant that you had to refactor Kubernetes to have these open hooks, SPIs, against which all these now providers could now hook.
So they introduced this concept of like interfaces, and you can just like they maintain the interface, and you write the plugin to integrate toward your specific.
Right.
And so they did it. That started like 4 or 5 years ago. So it started with storage drivers, and then it moved to cloud specific code. And the biggest cleanup was the one that happened like a few weeks ago, which was 1.7 million lines of code, which was, I think, Google and VMware, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Huge. So, it wasn't deleted, by the way. It just moved back to the respective.
Yes.
It's still being maintained. Don't freak out. Like it's just not being maintained in Kubernetes itself, which is actually, when you think about it, better. Because as long as the interface is stable, and each of those key interfaces went through a long stabilization process and vetting and over multiple, like 20 different versions of Kubernetes. Right?
30. Yeah.
30? Yeah, 30. That's what it was. All these different interfaces were introduced. There's an RFC, or RFP for all this stuff. There's like a huge process to then extract, define, and stabilize these interfaces.
Yes.
And then to rebase all these integrations on top of that.
Yes.
And then to move them out. So it's actually better now, because now, so long as those interfaces are relatively stable, these cloud vendors can move independent of Kubernetes. They can go faster or slower depending on their need,
Exactly.
So you might even get more features.
Exactly.
By teasing it out into small microservices.
Yeah, and then people will complain, no, we don't have the kubelet version 1.30 container image easily accessible in Docker. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not.
Come on.
You don't deserve it, people. It's a nice to have. People are nice. So
people are nice. Yeah. That's a good point. There's a lot of so look, you and I both work for companies that, well, at least for you, I'm sure they're treating you okay. Me, I'm being treated okay too, but it's mostly coffee. They just give me coffee.
Yes.
I'm not even sure if I'm technically employed. I'm just kidding. I kid. No, we're all being treated well, right?
Yes.
And but I'm saying there's also a lot of people who just do this for that's how I started with Spring. I was a contributor to Spring in my free time.
Yeah.
In addition to whatever I was doing in my regular life, Anyway, all this. So the performance stuff, that's really interesting to me. Actually, that whole world optimization, because you can't just focus on this thing and then have it obviated or mooted by all this drudge and slowness over here.
Yes.
Like if you focus on that and don't do this, what's the point?
Yeah. So we did an overview over also all the optimization. So CDS, PGO, native, crack.
Okay. We're not. This is not that kind of party. You can't just throw acronyms around.
Okay. CDS is class data sharing.
Right. What's that?
That is a very good question. I cannot explain CDS. Dan knows more about this stuff than me. You can go look it up. It's a Java optimization for optimizing how the compiler works so that the app starts faster, generally speaking. That's the TLDR.
Just imagine, but basically you take a run of the program, you create a file. That file then it allows the JVM to more instantly get back to that working state without having to derive it again.
Okay,
It's like
that's
good.
Thank
It's
you.
meta information about the classes in the program.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's CDS.
CDS,
and that's in
PGO.
OpenJDK.
Yes.
You don't need a vendor-specific distribution. Go on.
Then you have PGO.
Profile guided optimization. That's
Correct.
in GraalVM, the professional one.
Yes. So that's essentially you scan the code, you create a profile for the application by extracting metadata. While it's running, and then that helps the GVM optimize the code for the application.
Right, for the native image.
Yeah. Then you have CRAC, which is checkpoint restore, coordinated
restore at checkpoint.
Coordinated restore and checkpoint. Thank you.
Project Cryo, right?
So the underline is Cryo, which is a Linux function, which means checkpoint restore in user space, right? And essentially what that is that you build the container, you build the image, the app or the container, you spin it up, you checkpoint it, you snapshot it, and then when you restore it, it just starts faster because you are snapshotting. Essentially means you just take the entire memory and dump it to disk. Restoring is restoring it from disk.
Right.
Essentially.
Yeah.
So when you restore the application, but when you restore it, you create a new image. So a derived image. Right. And that image is faster to start because it just has to load the memory from disk, and that's it. So your limiting factor is I/O, but like I/O is getting better. Like you run on SSD. So
SSD that's Azul and Liberica.
Yes.
So there's distributions of the JDK. Yes. Actually, GraalVM supports native images, and they support GraalVM PGO.
Yes.
But they also just support native images. So GraalVM supports native images. Azul supports Project Crack.
Yes.
Liberica is the only one that supports both.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
I'm not sure about together, but you can do one or the other, right?
But there was an interesting thing. So Spring apparently, Spring supports Crack, right? So you have a Spring app, you can just implement Crack. But yesterday we had this idea. I was talking with Pasha from Belsoft.
Yeah.
We were having a chat.
He was on the show recently.
Yeah. So we were talking. We came up with this idea saying, can we crack Kafka? Because Kafka is slow to start. And if you want to put Kafka inside test containers to test against Kafka, it takes a few seconds for it to start. Yes. But if we crack it, we can restore it quicker. So it will be quicker to start. And we tried it and it didn't work because Kafka doesn't support crack, because when you start a Kafka server, it has all these open sockets, right? And you cannot snapshot a process if it has open sockets. You have to close them, snapshot, and then reopen them again.
Right.
So Kafka doesn't support that. It doesn't have built-in support.
But okay, I was going to say there's an interface, right? You
have to implement the interface.
Right. It's it's called a resource in Crack or Spring if you're using Spring. They're not, but if you are using Spring, dear listener, audience people, you can implement disposable bean and initializing. No, is that right? Yeah. That feels right. Let's just say that's what it is. There's two interfaces. You implement those, and Spring will give you a chance to initialize after the application has been started up from a snapshot.
Correct.
And it'll give you a chance to destroy and then null out your sockets and your credentials and all that stuff,
or files or whatever. Exactly. Yeah. And but later Pasha found whatever the equivalent of an enhancement proposal in Apache world, I don't remember what it is, where they are talking about actually implementing that for Kafka. So it's coming. So we talked about these things. We talked about native images. We talked about JIT versus just-in-time completion versus ahead-of-time completion. So JIT versus AOT, the trade-offs.
I want to watch this talk.
This stuff it's recorded.
It's a whole world discussion around the whole world optimization. I cannot wait.
And then we talked about all of this and how, in, for example, serverless environments like Google Cloud Run, but it's also available on other clouds. CPU Boost can help you speed up the startup time for a container, right? You just CPU boost the container at startup, so you give it twice the amount of CPU.
Just to get its affairs in order.
Correct.
And then once it's running it, you can switch it down to a lower CPU.
Correct. Because
you can do it live?
Yeah.
While the program is running?
On Cloud Run, we can do it. And we can do it in Kubernetes as well. That's the parts I covered, right?
Oh.
So in most cloud provider runtimes,
I never knew that.
For containers, you have the CPU boost feature, which in the case of Google, it gives you 100% of CPU for, I think, up until your application is ready, plus 60 seconds. So that's okay. That's because you run on a serverless environment, you have less knobs to tweak, right? Obviously. So, but then in Kubernetes 1.27, they introduced something called dynamic resource allocation, where you can on the spot modify CPU memory for a running pod. And we wrote a controller that takes advantage of that feature and can CPU boost your application. so
try running your own platform. I dare you.
So-
You're not gonna do this. You're not gonna get to this point until 10 years later.
Yes.
And this is after bazillions of people have been looking at the code for a decade, and this is a thing we only have in the last few years or whatever. I mean,
Yes, just last year.
yes,
actually.
last year.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so many oh my God.
So basically, you write your YAML file to define your application in Kubernetes, you deploy it, and then you write a boost configuration. And in the boost configuration, you say, I want to boost by 100%, which means double up the amount of CPU. And then you say the condition. Do you want to boost until the pod is ready, or do you want to boost until for a certain amount of time? And then you deploy that. So you deploy the CPU boost config first, and then you deploy the app. And what happens is, if the CPU boost config is deployed, then when the app gets deployed, we read the resource requests part of the app.
Yeah, the spec.
And yes,
the,
we
object.
modify it to add the whatever percentage you want to add, and then we send that to the scheduler. So the scheduler will schedule your pod on a node that has the resources available, and then once the condition is met, we take that CPU back. So I did a demo where I tested with Spring Boot app with Spring 3,
Right.
and I could get the app to start 2 times faster. I brought it down from 13 seconds to 6 seconds with just 100% CPU until the app is ready.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
So that requires Kubernetes 1.27, and our feature is called Kube CPU Boost. It's open source, by the way. You can download it, and yeah, that's basically it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
We could keep going, but I don't think it's going to get better than that.
Yeah, we can probably. We should probably stop.
Yeah, I want people to leave on that note,
Yes.
knowing.
We'll be talking 40 minutes.
Oh yeah, that too.
Yeah.
C'était un vrai plaisir, mon ami. Merci d'être
beaucoup.
venu.
Merci de m'avoir. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Oh my God, so good.